Namaskar. Welcome to another episode of What Does This Data Say? The word Vikas, you all must have been hearing many times, especially from the top BJP leadership. And whenever Mr. Modi gets into the election mode, he uses this buzzword Vikas very often. During the 2014 elections, Mr. Modi went on selling the Gujarat model of Vikas. Now, of late, the BJP leadership has started talking about the UP model. In fact, in Telangana, last week when the BJP people were here, they were talking of bringing the UP model to Telangana should they win the next election. So today I will dig into the data of the Vikas model, and I will be looking at the development of the states. I will be comparing the BJP ruled states with the opposition ruled states, and let us see who has done better. The time period here is 2014 to 2020, that is 6 years, because RBI has still to give the data for the year 2021. The data which I am going to analyze comes from this report of RBI Handbook of Statistics on Indian States 2021. You can download it from the RBI site, the link I have given here, or you can just search it on the internet. There is only one parameter which I have chosen out of this huge report that I think is representative parameter for comparing the development of the various states. This one parameter which I have chosen is the per capita net state domestic product at constant prices. I'll be comparing the figures from 2014 to 2020. I know all of you would be knowing what is GDP and what is constant prices, etc. However, I'll just quickly recap this parameter just for the benefit of people who may not know. Now, we all know what is GDP. It consists of four main parameters. First is the net exports, that is the difference between what we export and what we import. Second is the government spending on goods and services. Third is investments brought by businesses, and then lastly is the consumption done by households. Now, I could have used the GDP as a parameter to compare the growth of various states. However, GDP is a gross parameter, and what we are more interested to look at is the net of expenses. It is something like when a company reports the gross profit and the net profit, and that is the reason I have chosen the net GDP. Now, net GDP is a measure where you remove certain components, certain expenses like the depreciation, etc. And secondly, I have used constant prices, which means that the base of this analysis is 2011-12, so that we get a uniform picture of the growth. If I use the current prices, then that becomes padded with the inflation, and that doesn't give you any analysis when you do a comparison with the previous years. Per capita is nothing but we divide the GDP of a state with the average population of the state during the year. So let's get on with the analysis now. Now, in this graph, I have plotted the per capita net state domestic product at constant prices. The yellow bars here you see are for 2019-2020, and the blue bars are for the year 2013-14, which is below this. Now, don't worry about trying to see the figures. In the next few slides, I'm going to zoom onto this figure. This is just to give you an overall picture. Now, according to the 2019-2020 net state GDP figures, the states which come on top are Goa, Delhi, and Sikkim. And the bottom three are Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, and Manipur. Goa's net GDP is a little over 3 lakh rupees, while that of Bihar, which is at the bottom, is 30,621. Now let's zoom into this figure. As I said, Goa is on top with a net GDP of above 3 lakh. Now, if I take the states other than the Northeast and the UTs, then the top three states become Delhi, Haryana, and Gujarat. Haryana around 1.76 lakhs and Gujarat around 1.64. The remaining states above 1.5 lakh are Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Maharashtra, Karnataka, Telangana, and Uttarakhand. The middle states are Himachal, Pondicherry, Mizoram, Punjab, Andhra, Arunachal Pradesh, and down to Chhattisgarh. The net GDP ranges from 1.4 lakhs to that of Chhattisgarh, which is around 75,000. And the bottom 10 states are West Bengal, Nagaland, J&K, Meghalaya, Madhya Pradesh, Assam, Jharkhand, Manipur, UP, and Bihar. The lowest three are Bihar, UP, and Jharkhand, if I don't consider the northeastern states. The GDP here ranges from less than 75,000 down to that of Bihar of about 30,000 rupees. In this episode, when I'm referring GDP, I actually mean per capita net state domestic product. Now, because this is too long to say every time, I am sometimes using just the word GDP. Also, just a reminder, this is the individual GDPs of each state and not for India. And again, it's the per capita net state GDP. So don't try to go and compare it with the overall India figures. They are not going to match. Now I am going to compute the growth rate. This I will do by computing the compounded average growth rate between 2014 and 2020, that is for these 6 years for each state. So the graph I get is something like this. Again, don't worry about trying to see the figures. I'm going to get into this in detail in the next few slides. The growth rate varies between 1%, the lowest, which is Meghalaya, to Mizoram, which is 11.8%. Now, the bottom three states are Meghalaya, Pondicherry, and Nagaland, while the top three are Mizoram, Tripura, and Andaman and Nicobar. One thing you might have noticed that at both ends, the northeastern states or the union territories are figuring, whereas the main states are somewhere in between. So I will now deal with these two separately, that is the main states and the northeast and the UTs separately. So we look at the states other than northeastern states and the union territories first. Here is the graph. There are three bins here showing the growth rates: 3 to 5%, 5 to 7, and 7 to 9. In the lowest bin, we have the states of West Bengal, UP, Jharkhand, Rajasthan, Punjab, and Chhattisgarh having a growth between 3 and 5% during these 6 years. While on the top side, we have Telangana, Goa, and Gujarat, who showed a growth of 7 to 9% in the same period. All remaining states were in the bin 5 to 7%. Now I'll quickly show you the same graph for the northeastern states. The state which showed the lowest growth was Meghalaya, which was around 1%, while the topmost performing state was Mizoram at 11.8%. And in the Union Territory segment, we only have three UTs. Pondicherry showed the lowest growth, while J&K and Chandigarh were between 3 and 5%. So now we have the CAGR for all the states during this 6-year period. The only thing now left is to map it on to which party was ruling most during this 6-year period. So we have BJP and its allies who were in power in Bihar, UP, Jharkhand, MP, and so on up to Goa. Then we have the opposition ruled states, which were West Bengal, Punjab, Kerala, Telangana, and Delhi. And then we have a shared segment where half the time possibly BJP was in power and other half the opposition, which are Chhattisgarh, Rajasthan and Maharashtra. And then I have put one more segment here as others, which right now I don't know whether they fall in opposition or are BJP allies, which is Odisha and Andhra Pradesh. So here is the net result of this analysis. I'm going to show you only the data for the states other than Northeastern states and union territories. So we have BJP and its allies who were in power in 11 states, who gave a average growth during this period of 5.4%. The maximum growth shown was by Goa, and the minimum growth was shown by UP at 3.9%, which ties with Jharkhand also at 3.9%. Now, if you think Goa is a small state, then the next one in line is Gujarat at 7%. The opposition was in power in 5 states. They gave an average growth of 4.8%. The highest growth was that of Telangana at 7.1% and the lowest in Punjab at 3.6%. In the shared category, we have 3 states which showed average growth of 3.8%. The lowest in this category was Chhattisgarh at 3%, while the highest was Maharashtra at 4.8%. In the others category, this is the place where only a single party was in power is the most interesting outcome. This is the highest growth segment for those 6 years at 6.4%. The lowest here was 6% and the highest was 6.7%, which is Andhra Pradesh. So it appears that the states where, other than BJP, whichever party was in power for the entire term, like Odisha, Andhra, and Telangana, were giving a better growth to its people than the states where BJP or its allies or even the opposition were ruling. The worst growth was shown by the states where power was shared between BJP and the opposition. It looks like that no one really bothered about the state's progress. If you notice, UP is at the bottom of the list at 3.9%, and this state has been ruled continuously by the Bharatiya Janata Party. There is nothing in this data which can suggest that UP has a growth model at all. In fact, it is the worst performer within the country. The states which one should really be concerned about are Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, Jharkhand, Punjab, and Chhattisgarh. So it is quite ironical that the Prime Minister talks about the growth model of UP in other states. Actually, there is much more needed to be done within Uttar Pradesh itself. One last observation from my side. The difference of average growth between the BJP ruled states and the opposition is just 0.6%. Now, is that the effect of the so-called double engine Sarkar? Though BJP keeps talking about this double engine effect, I really don't think it has any effect in real terms. If you see, the states like Telangana, Odisha, Andhra, all have done much better while they are being in the opposite side. So that's all for this episode. I will see you again next week with some more interesting data. Till then, namaskar and goodbye.